Professor Michael Parke, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your story?
Gosh, starting off with a very simple, easy question, like
Exactly.
what's your name? Where did you grow up? What's your
hmm
family like? What is your story? Okay, so can we get a little meta? Is that
It's
Absolutely.
your
I'm a
story.
meta person. So another way to ask what your story is like, what's your mission? What's your purpose? And I think early on with great mentors, I really wanted to grow as much as possible in life, right? Become the best version of myself, be the most knowledgeable I can in certain areas. My mentor used to say, do you want to go through life or grow through life? And that really resonated with me. And I think more recently, I would say in the last couple of years, I've been asking myself a related question. How can I best connect with or support the work I'm doing or the people I'm with? And whether that's like my collaborators, students, my family members, my daughters, my wife, how can I best show up to this situation, right? Is that listening? If it's a clear goal, like a task that needs to be done, do I have my best there? And I think that framing really has allowed me to be more grounded and take a pause and figure out how best to serve the work I'm doing or others I'm with. So it's really kind of my current mission of this, like growing as much as possible. So that's the meta thing. And I think the work thing is I study how employees and leaders navigate interpersonally risky expression at work. So things like voicing your concerns or problems, things like emotions. And I teach and consult on what makes leaders effective and how to build effective teams. And so I think that rounds out, most of my story. But I'm really fortunate and blessed to have great mentors, including my wife, who, all I am the person I am to them because people have helped me grow and become a better person throughout my journey.
Great answer. And I gotta say, we always lead off every single conversation with this question. But I think this is the first time we have someone not only answer it, but also break down what this question means to you. So that's a super cool angle for us.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. This is an intentionally vague question. And we've gone into it with a couple of people, but we asked this question because we like hearing how the guest frames their story. We like hearing what storytelling means to them. Some people are very career heavy. Some people are very family heavy. Some people are very like, when I was born in X, Y, and Z, this made me this. And it's just an interesting way to see how people think about their story and think about storytelling as a whole. So it's purposely vague, and we love just like diving into the different types of answers. But I'm really excited and super nervous because I'm always awkward when I interview people I know. Right? I'm bad at that one. Like it's the same way like when I'm interviewed by people I know, it's the worst interviews. But I'm excited because you were my first professor at Wharton, and we've been talking
Yes.
more about Wharton over this year as the show's changed and adapted to a really insane Wharton schedule. So Wharton's come up a lot. But it's a really hard thing to explain business school, or I've recently been calling it consultant summer camp. But it's a really hard thing to explain because a lot of it is traveling and a lot of it is experiencing new things. A bunch of my friends are at Quantico this weekend. A bunch of my friends went to the firefighter academy. How would you describe the business school experience, and what do you think is the real value add as someone who's trying to explain it to other people?
Yeah, and you mean specifically for like MBA students,
Yeah.
or because I think it does matter on the audience, right? Like who and like the value of Wharton for me or a staff member, or it could be different, but for MBA students, and honestly, you may have a better answer than I, but here's what I see. I think that a school like Wharton and an MBA allows students to reinvent themselves, right? And sometimes that may be having greater clarity on the direction they're already going, and they want to keep going in that direction. So like, if you're a finance person coming in and then you want to leave as a finance person, you have better clarity on what that looks like for you, how you want to do it, who you want to work with, better opportunities, networks that have grown, right? That support you in that, both with work, but I think in life. And I think for other students, though, it's an opportunity to kind of take a step back, reset, reevaluate their priorities, what matters to them in life, and how they want to envision that and do that. And I think that opportunity to do that, but plus really smart people and resources to help you make that actionable. That's what business school is about, right? It's almost like if you think of the analogy of like a startup accelerator, but in this case, the startup is you as a person. And what do you need for that? You need to be exposed to a lot of different ideas and opportunities. You need to be figuring out what you're about, what are your values, what are your strengths, weaknesses, and then figure out like how to make that happen. And I think business schools bring those things together. It's like a prolonged startup accelerator for who you want to craft, what your career you want to craft, and who you want to craft as a person. And I think that would be the way I would explain it if that resonates with your experience.
No, it does. I think with me, because I came from a tech background and I wanted to stay in tech, there was a lot of questions about what's the value add if I'm not pivoting into something specific like finance or banking or consulting or even into tech. But I think for me, it's this what you were saying about like reevaluating and taking a second to reset and ask yourself, okay, I've been on this path and coming from like an immigrant experience at in the US and going from UCLA job to job, you are very set on like you need a job, you need to be in the next job, that's how you stay, right? So taking like the 2 years or so far 1 year to take a step back, reset and say, why am I doing this? And I think even like I've been prioritizing so much joy these 2 years and learning how joy and fun fits into my life more than
Yeah,
just achievement. I think
totally.
that's been such an interesting change to my story.
Absolutely. Right. So like there's something to figure out. And I often advise leaders and students to do this, not like obviously don't take a 2 year sabbatical or MBA every couple, but
Yeah.
like take this pause and being like, are you actualizing on your values? And that means you really need to understand what your values are. And I think an MBA program like this has so many opportunities to kind of understand what your values are because there's so many opportunities to pursue, right? And you have to prioritize and you get to see yourself, what does matter to me? And that's really important for actualizing that out of business school as well.
So when you work with high achievers, like you're in a space of obviously surrounded by high achievers who are constantly working to achieve the most. How do you talk about taking a step back and reevaluating your story? Because that seems scary. Like I don't want to take 2 years off or 1 year off. I don't want to sit back and question everything I just did. I worked so hard to get here.
Real quick, a joke. Sometimes people quip that the W in Wharton stands for workaholics to your achievement oriented. But yeah, like how do you do that? So I often try to frame this question when this question comes up with talking to students or anyone is, okay, let's just do this thought experiment. Let's say you could take away the performance pressure and the fear, right? What would you do? What would you want to do? And I think that's a first good step to answering that question in terms of reevaluating. Because if you took that pressure, whatever that pressure is coming from, right? It could be coming from stories you tell yourself, stories your parents told you, stories society's telling you, right? It could be talking about financial pressure, whatever it is. If you took that all away, would you keep doing what you're doing? So start there. Remove the fear for this thought experiment because that'll give you clear about your passions, your values, what you want to be doing. And that's a constraint then with what you can work with. Because then the next question is like, A, can I make that possible? Right? What's holding me back? Is it legitimate fears? Like, things I actually get, like, I can't do that? Or is it like perceptual fears, things that I'm holding myself back? So then you can work with that and be like, look, how did you get to where you are now? You probably had to take a lot of risks, right? Like, yes, people come from different walks of life. Some have more privilege than others, right? Absolutely. Let's recognize that. But you probably had to take some risks and probably had to work really hard to get where you're at. So you most likely have the skill set to be able to do this again. And could that be worth it then at the end of the day when you like, instead of seeing what's in the way of getting there, visualizing the end goal of like what it would look like once you're there? So I think that's kind of the thought process for that, because it is scary. Like, let's admit that, like, it is scary to try something new at this stage. But if you take that beginner's mind of like, wow, if I was just starting out, you could end up maybe being happier when all is said and done.
Now, for those of you listening, I should call this out to you that today Gaurav is wearing this t-shirt that says "World's Greatest Narcissist." And we talked about how that shirt came to be in an earlier episode. Grove has told the story, but today, since we have Michael here, could you maybe walk us through that class you were teaching that kind of gave birth to this whole story? What was the content of that class? What lessons were you trying to impart on your students that involved narcissism?
Yeah, so as part of the intro leadership and teams class, we talk about this study on CEO narcissism. We try to get students introduced to how we take an evidence-based approach at Wharton with a lot of the principles we teach come from science. And that's kind of the setup. And Gaurav talked about your podcast, if I'm remembering correctly, right? Gaurav, is that correct?
Yeah, so someone had said, I want you to tell the story too, because a lot of people like want to hear from your perspective, because we did my perspective in a previous episode. Someone had said like having a podcast makes you a narcissist. So then I rose my hand and I joked that I have a podcast, so I take that personally. And then I participated. But you can keep going.
Yeah. So I appreciated that. And then I tried to make a joke, and I hope it didn't offend Gaurav, because I felt, oh man, it might be narcissistic promoting your podcast in the first day of class or something like that.
I also stand by, I didn't say the name of the podcast, so I wasn't promoting it. That's my stance.
I appreciate your willingness to be engaged in that. And then it was just so fun, because then I think on the last day of class, you wore this shirt, and then we all had a laugh about it. And it just brought such energy and enthusiasm and excitement and just joy to the class that like you can't manufacture. Like I couldn't have planned that, you know what I mean? And so your spontaneity and improv and ability to roll with it, I'm very grateful for, because it definitely, I will always remember you and always remember that section because of that interaction experience. Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. No, I found it very funny. I think I lead with humor most, right? So I think, and this was the first class ever at Wharton. I think it was like an hour in, like this is when we were all still like I can't even imagine observing this now, because everyone's so buttoned up still. Like we all
people are still a little bit like
computers are closed, no phones. Like we're all so locked in on this class. Yeah. So I think it was. I loved it. I loved like breaking the humor with that. And then I learned you can get any T-shirt on Amazon very fast. And then so for the last day I had this one, and then I had another member of my learning team where I hate narcissists. So I love this because I broke you with this. And like 5 minutes later, Alex broke you by wearing the I hate narcissists shirt.
When he says broke, I like was literally in teaching about culture, and then just saw it and like just started cracking up in the middle of the class, and everyone's like, what is this? What is happening? And I'm like, did you all see these shirts? So yeah, it was a very memorable moment too.
But it is an interesting thing about human culture, right? And storytelling. Because I do think the cohort I'm in is 3H, is extremely close. And I think that does stem from creating that community in those first few weeks in this class with humor. Obviously, you played a huge part in that, and like leaning on each other. And I think now we're all going out and doing all these really exciting things. And it's that thing about storytelling where those initial beats are so important when you're building a group.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I appreciate you calling attention to that. They absolutely matter. I don't want to, as a researcher, I don't want to overgeneralize an effect that it was like all this class or all, there's so much involved. There's leadership fellows, there's personalities, there's motivations, ambitions, right? There's like all of those things. But usually what you're talking about is the interaction effect, where it's like the people and the place and the culture, like combined in a way that can kind of really spawn motivation. But that's a different point than the other point you're making, which is like things like humor, storytelling. We have research on this. These matter for leaders. This make people connect on a more personal level. It builds trust. It builds psychological safety. And I think you're absolutely right to isolate and identify that effect, that it does matter, right? And so that's cool. That's really awesome that you all are staying so cohesive and committed together. And I appreciate the attribution, but as a researcher, I'm like, there's definitely more involved than just like that one class we had together.
See, I'm not a researcher, so I can say whatever I want.
You're a good example for that class. I mean, what better way to study narcissism with someone wearing that shirt? But We would love to delve a little bit more into the work you do. Obviously, you know, humor is one important attribute to a great leader and culture. But for the way you are studying organizations and leadership, what are the hallmarks of a good leader, a good organizational environment? What goes into
Yeah, I mean, I should say you all should take the elective I teach on
that?
executive leadership because we cover this. But just to give you kind of, I guess, I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version of it. What we go over in that class is there are these 6 core styles of leadership that, um, if you're hitting all of these as a leader or a co-leader, or you have multiple leaders who are hitting these styles, that's based on the data and the science we have going to lead to one of the most effective teams or environments or cultures. So in that class, we not only identify like all of these leadership functions serve key different motivators that are important for people in work, but then effective leaders know how to apply the different styles and different behaviors at different times. It's not a simple answer, right? Because it's not like you can say you need these things and that's it. You really need this foundation of all of these behaviors to reach peak motivation, peak engagement, to really inspire people. The other way you could slice it is like level 1 and level 2 motivators. Level 1 is like if people don't know what their goals are, what their role is, like it's more challenging to get those level 2 motivators of like inspiration, mastery, autonomy, right? So I would say you got to have the basics down first before you can get those higher level motivators.
So I have a few questions on this, but I think starting off with motivation specifically and looking at the business school concepts and you teaching this from a meta perspective. In this age of AI, this was something coming to business school, I was kind of excited about, like, how am I going to learn with AI? And teaching with AI is a huge challenge. How do you keep students motivated to actually learn this material when maybe you can just like throw a paper together using ChatGPT?
I'll answer this in 2 ways. So the first answer to your question, how many times am I going to say it? First answer to your question is actually some of the things that help people learn the best are needed even more, which is experiential learning, right? So like in the classroom, are we experiencing the material we're learning about? And the ways that I try to facilitate that and other people are effective at that is through activities, simulations, and I use a lot of videos, right? And so they're experiencing it. So those principles of learning by trying it out, learning by seeing it, like watching film, right? Like I used to be an athlete. How do athletes learn? They practice and they watch film, right? Same thing with students and leadership and teams. So I think that principle is going to stay the same. And so if you're not doing enough of that, maybe we need to do even more, right? That's changed. The other then is the reflection bit, the assignments. Are there ways AI can complement the learning rather than like reduce learning because people are just using these tools and not actually writing papers and like reflecting on it and those types of things? And I think the way that professors, at least what I've seen at Wharton, try to do that is be much more innovative with their assignments, right? And so instead of like writing a paper, although I admit I still have a paper, it's like, can you create an app that trains leaders how to be effective leaders? Of course, I think Peter Capelli just tried this in his elective, which is you need to teach an AI program how to give a performance review. So they have to take the content from class, which is like how to give effective performance reviews, and then create an AI tool that can like simulate this and do this, right? One assignment I did is I do a video case analysis for a team project, which is you have to find videos out there that actually reflect content from class and analyze it. So it's harder for AI to do that right yet because, and I let them use it. Like if AI helps you find good video, analyze, great, but they still have to perform and talk and like perform and give the analysis in a recorded video, right? So I think that is the other way that these tools can be used as a complement rather than a substitute for learning.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the storytelling of motivation, right? It's you have to, because it's getting a little bit harder now to tell yourself why you should read this book or why you should take this class or why it's important to learn the fundamentals of storytelling, right? Because you can basically throw a bunch of words in ChatGPT and say, make this look nice. But building that arc, building that narrative, pulling someone in, especially now that they get 20 perfectly written emails. Like the one that stands out, the narrative moat, is the one that has the story that is compelling, that pulls you in, that can kind of raise above the fray of these AI driven. And this is the same thing with what you're talking about in business leading education. It's learning the fundamentals is so important because that's a distinguishing factor.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I think I would add that our role then is also like content experts, right? Because these machines just spit back ideas that you're feeding them. And like part of your role is like what your story is to be the expert on what that story is, right? You can still craft the narrative, you can still craft the content. Like maybe what it spits back is like, that's not bad, but like maybe there's a better way to do that. Or maybe it's not hitting a point that I want to hit. And so then you can iterate with it to try to like find that language or try to find that way that it comes out, right? Mm-hmm. I think we still need human experts to feed it the ideas, feed it the content, and like curate that way in the best possible story for what you're trying to communicate. Yeah.
What I've heard from your class design that I really liked is how hands-on and practical it sounds, which when you try to design a class, that's something people always go for. But what I've learned over the years of just being in school and now having entered the workspace is that how little out of all the classes I've taken over the years, how little those were directly applicable, the content themselves in the actual job. And a lot of times I'm learning what I'm doing on the job or in that process of interviewing, getting to know the company. And that's one of the things I get asked the most by current students is, what classes translate, how do you prepare yourself? But the best answer I could give them from my experience, kind of the other way around, is like, you kind of don't a lot of the times. And then you kind of really need to learn by doing, actually be in that environment.
Yeah, I would say I would push back as I think your leadership and teams content, it could be the most transferable. And we get a lot of alumni where they're like, I wish I paid more attention in my leadership and teams classes, because I think some of those dynamics are transferable. So what I think happens is like sometimes an aha moment where it's like they experience it or learn about it and then like they go back, right? Because then learn by doing, but like, wait a minute, there was this framework. I remember like Michael talking about, or Adam or whoever at school is talking about, and Nancy, and like then they put it into context and then are able to apply it much better. So I would say both and, but I think what we hear at least is a lot of the technical classes or some of the content, those sometimes aren't as transferable.
Yeah, and that's a really great way to put it as well. And I do realize I'm kind of only halfway through with that explanation because sometimes the moment I realize what I have learned, it doesn't come as a moment where, oh, I knew what I learned, here's how I'm going to apply it. It's more so that, something happened, I encountered this situation, and I, in action, applied this experience or skill to resolve it. And then after the fact, looking back and realize, oh, these are the things I had already learned that just came back to me that helped me with the situation. So it's kind of a counterintuitive story, if you will, of how learning applies to your day-to-day problems. Yeah. Because a lot of times you only realize it after the fact.
Well, and what you're talking about in research, we call it declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. Declarative knowledge is having the information in your head and knowing what to do. Procedural knowledge is being able to do it, right? And so I think you're talking about those two types. And we talked a little bit sometimes about the knowing doing gap too. It's like knowing what to do is different than actually being able to do it. And what I hear you talking about is really that procedural doing, like, that's what that means, right?
Yeah, and that's that aha moment.
I mean, it's the aha moment of that is so, it's like usually more rewarding than the aha moment of like in the classroom, for sure.
Being able to name something and show examples of it is incredibly powerful. When I am taught a concept that seems obvious if you think about it, but the fact that there's a name and there's previous history and there's examples of the human condition, that unlocks something, because then you can tell yourself a story about it. Like something I deal with in therapy a lot is like to stop shooting on myself. Like Kevin knows, we
Yeah.
talked about this a lot on the show, but
Yeah.
like seeing that as an example and like putting a name to it, then I can put it in my story and say, oh, I should stop doing this because I'm noticing it. Like I just did it there. Like I'm noticing it. I'm seeing the story. And that's why naming and researching and finding these things that you can add to your own story is so powerful.
100%, right? We learn through language, we learn through vocabulary. And you gave me an insight right here, which is I knew this in a like research way of like models and taxonomies, but you gave me the story, which I'm like, you're right. How we communicate the story and to ourselves and others about the concept really matters, right? I really love what you just said in terms of connecting those dots. For absolutely, it matters so much to have a common set of vocabulary. And that's what science, I think, really gives us is like, what is this thing? What does it mean? What predicts it? What consequences does it have? But another way of saying that is like, what is this thing's story, right? Beginning, middle, end. So that's really cool.
Yeah, we talk about this with everything on the show. It's the stories to tell ourselves, the stories that motivate us, and being able to name something. We had a whole episode back in season 1 about labels. Like labels have the power to like hold you back because you're labeling yourself. I'm this one thing, so I'm always going to do this one thing. But also to empower you. Like, oh, I have this title, I have this label. That gives me confidence to do this. And if you can put that as part of yourself and understand that, you can either combat it or use it to empower you. It's a big part of our show.
Gaurav, I'm smiling ear to ear because you're reading my mind. Literally, I stopped myself, but I was like, if this keeps going, the point I'm going to make is labels can be liberating and limiting. That's my phrase. And it's exactly what you just said, is they can be very liberating because it builds knowledge and understanding. And that's powerful because then you can use that knowledge. We see this in personality a lot. Oh, I'm this personality, right? And they can limit themselves, right? And we don't want that effect of labels. We want labels to be liberating and empowering rather than limiting and holding people back.
Yeah. And I think on that point about labeling, it often happens in a way where we've identified a label for ourselves and we think, this is who I am or how I am. Then at some point, maybe we are not satisfied with just being that and we want to change. And that can happen both on an individual level or in like a management or team-based environment where the team culture has been a certain way for a long time now. And then you might recognize there's an opportunity to better your environment and culture. But that transition can be hard, right? Because what Gaurav has talked about with his cohort, how close and active and involved they are, the reason it happened largely can be attributed to how they set the tone from the start. But when you've already set the tone and you want to shift it to a different tone, that seems very difficult. Do you have any good insights or studies that can be a great advice for people who want to make that transition when it's already starting off, not necessarily on the wrong foot, but maybe a little different?
Yeah, absolutely. I think change is so hard, and it's in the literatures, it's attacked in so many different ways, right? I'm going to set the context before I answer your question. Like there's research on organizational change, right? There's research on habits, changing habits, right? There's research on something called deliberate practice, right? Which is also related to change because you're developing skills and improvement. There's rock bottom theory, like people only change when they hit rock bottom, like whether that's a company or an individual, right? Okay, it can't get any worse. You might as well change something now, right? So like there's all these different theories and research on different elements of change. I think the one that I will go to, because it's the one I think that's most concrete and actionable about individual change, since that's what you asked about, is the research on like this deliberate practice. Like, so essentially it's setting very specific goals for like a behavior you want to enact in a specific situation, right? So like let's give an example. You want to stretch yourself and you're more quiet in team meetings. And you really, we know people like this, right? And their voices are lost and we need them to speak up. Okay, great. I have this goal in this meeting, next meeting, I am going to say one or two things, right? Okay, what prevents me from doing that? Well, I'm maybe more introverted, so I need more time to think before I speak. Well, can you get the agenda ahead of time? Can you come prepared? Can you know and prepare something in advance? Then that gives you the confidence to do that, right? Or maybe you go in knowing you're going to speak, so you're really reflecting and working hard, writing and thinking, so that you get an opportunity and really challenge yourself, right? And then you keep doing that, and then you get feedback from people you trust saying how it goes. That's the deliberate practice model: is you set a goal, you practice that behavior, you reflect on how it went, what could go different or better next time, and then ideally you have someone who could be not necessarily a coach. A coach is ideal if you have a coach or a therapist, but if you have someone who can give you feedback, because we can't see everything about the way we act. And so that's a very effective way, because you have accountability from another person, you get other feedback, you're setting specific goals, and it eventually becomes a habit that you just then do, and without intentional, deliberate goal setting and practice.
One point you mentioned just there, when it comes to maybe exploring coaching or therapist, someone else pointing out to you or walking you through what you're doing, because sometimes we don't know the full picture when we're in it ourselves. That's a really important angle as well. But then also from there, as a scholar and a researcher of management yourself, I'm sure this is something you explore a lot when you are studying organizations from the outside. How do you balance that fresh angle with the understanding that because you're not necessarily in that management position yourself of the people you're studying, there might be things that they understood better from their angle that's not obvious to you firsthand? How do you balance between those two angles in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things are coming to mind, right? I think one frame is that sometimes the answer is simple, but not easy. Do you know what I mean? Like that, where it's like, what to do is to do this, but to do that is really, really hard.
Yeah, it's like make your class hands-on.
It's really, really hard. Like, just speak up, just make the change. That's really, really hard. And again, that's a phrase from my mentor, or my coach, and I'd be like, you make it sound so easy. And he would say, it's not easy, but it's simple. If this is what you want, go do it. And it's really freaking hard. It's really hard to do that. And so I think that's one frame of like an outsider, an expert. Their job is to take if they're good, to take the complexity, to take all the moving parts, to take the data and find, okay, here's the thing, let's simplify, right? That's a value they can add. And then I think the expertise comes from how to make that happen. What are the obstacles in the way? What are the challenges? Who are all the players that I need to involve, right? And I think that's the back and forth of what you have. And so I think when worked well, it can be very complementary and very beneficial if people understand that, because I think sometimes the experts in the inside are like, these consultants don't, like, we've tried that, right? But that may be the answer. Like, how did you try it? What didn't work? Who was involved, right? And so that process develops that deeper understanding of, okay, maybe we can figure this out together, right?
And this simple, not easy thing, I think that's really, really powerful. For me,
Greg
for example,
Harden. I got to quote Greg Harden. That was his line, and he's incredible.
No, but I love that, because like there's that thing in psychology, right? Do you want to be braver? Then be more brave, right? And it's such a powerful story thing, because it's like, if you want to do something, do it, right? It's Nike, just do it. But like, for example, this year, to be more brave was my New Year's resolution, and because that's in my mind, when I'm stuck between a decision, and even micro decision, I'm like, oh, what's the brave thing to do? And I fall short a lot. Like, there's a lot of brave things I didn't do, but it allows me, like, okay, maybe I'll try this, because even if it's not the best decision, it's the brave thing to do, because we can put language to it. We can put goals to it. It sounds simple. It's not easy, but if we can, like, for this moment, label ourselves as, that's what I'm doing, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And to your own mantra, being brave if anxiety or fear is holding you back from doing something, right? Because I think, again, from a self-regulation, goal setting is like, be brave about what? Be very specific in both what it is and in the context. So Peter Gollwitzer did all this research on if-then statements, where they try to get people who like take their medication, follow through with exercise. And what they found is that if you set a goal and do an if-then statement, if this situation occurs, then I'm going to be brave, right? It's much more likely to happen because you're giving your brain situational cues to remember that mindset in that moment. Whereas without that, you often forget it. So I love that. And I think that's where I would encourage you to that may even help it crystallize even more.
It also comes back to that simple but not easy type of situations. And it's easy to say, just do this, or this is what I want to do. Like from being quiet to being talkative, or fitness goals. That's a very common one for a lot of people. But when you look at that final destination you want to get to, that is not an easy process, and it can be intimidating. And what you talked about, to try to break down that bigger problem, to start small, to start somewhere, that's a super important way for us to navigate that more difficult situation.
Goals are arranged in what's known as like goal hierarchies, right? So when you go up the hierarchy of goals, it's more about meaning and why. And when you go down, it's much more about specific things, right? So like, let's just use Gaurav's example, like be brave, right? That's a very abstract kind of value laden thing. And so the next question down is like, okay, be brave in what? Like what? Okay, I want to be brave in my relationships. I want to be brave in my work. Okay, that's the next laying down. What is the work then? It's like, I sometimes don't connect with people because I hold myself back, right? I don't ask a question, or I don't disclose something because it's too vulnerable and too risky. I don't want to be rejected, right? Like being brave is often about rejection, but some way, shape, or form. But then, okay, and what specific tasks is that rejection occurring? Is it my partner, or is it with this particular boss, or if this, in that situation? And then when you break it down, it's like, okay, what specifically am I physically doing, right? In that moment? Am I getting anxious? Am I getting sweaty? Like all the way to the body level. That's how they break down, right? Before that might be like, what am I thinking? How am I behaving? Am I kind of twiddling my thumbs? Do I hold myself back? So then when you get to that behavioral level of the action, that's the thing you have most control over, right? The thoughts and the behavior. That's the level you want to intervene on, because it's the most easily switchable to change that, right? The higher level is harder. So far, we can't control our brains really, like neurons and atoms, whatever. So it's that behavioral thought level is changing thought patterns and changing behaviors. And so that's whatever it is your goal, I would identify what is that specific behavior or behaviors that I want to work on and focus on. And that can get you that small win. And celebrate that when you do that, right? Yeah. So Gaurav, that's the other thing I want to add is like, you said I'm still failing, but I hope you're making a list of all the times you were brave when you weren't brave. I know. Because we have a bias of not doing that, and that matters so much for progress and motivation.
Yeah, I think celebrating the wins is so important. It's something our mentors at the Best One Yet podcast talk about all the time. I just had this issue where like I had finally gotten my summer internship within tech, and I immediately moved on and was stressing about something else. And a friend of mine's like, no, you have to celebrate this. Go out, do this, like have a drink with a friend. If we don't celebrate these things, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's kind of how I see business school sometimes. Like this is celebrating everything we've done, the success we've had, and the future.
Yeah, and it's such a common thing too. I was reading Shoe Dog, obviously the Phil Knight book about his story with Nike, and one recurring sentence I keep reading is like, no time to celebrate, on to the next thing. And it's just whole book's a list of the challenges he's facing as an entrepreneur. So it's clearly very common, but great advice from you today,
and
Michael. Yeah, absolutely. And we've learned so much great stories and insights. And to close off our conversation, we have a quick question. We call it Suspenders. This is where we ask you a fun random question unrelated to anything. You can give us any answer you feel like. And the question of the day is, if you were a fruit, what fruit will you be and why?
What fruit would I be? All right, let's just go with it for fun. I think I would be a mango fruit. And here's what's coming to mind as to why is it's my favorite fruit. I think it's the best fruit in the world. um, it takes a little bit of effort to peel it, to get to cut it, right? To not cut the core
Mhm.
with your fruit. So there's a little bit of effort, which I think working for something that's worth it is what life's about. Um, and the last part is um, I think food is such an important part of culture and community. And I never had a mango until I met my wife. And my wife is Indian. And that mango represents so much more of like learning more about different cultures, about different communities, about what that mango represents for so many different cultures. And I think
Yeah.
that's really cool as well. And so, yeah, it has a powerful image. So if I could be a fruit, I want to be a mango, super sweet, takes some skill to get, and like connecting people through food and cultures and in this awesome multicultural world we live in.
I love that. And I love how deep you took it. I would have just said watermelon because I love watermelon. But
Coconut for me.
I appreciate you so much for taking the time. This was such a great conversation, as it always is. Learned so much. And thank you for teaching us a little bit about behavioral storytelling.